Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So yes, we are going to get into the career journeys of Solomon and Phil today. We're going to dive deep into why they chose to get into their fields, the detours they took, and just get into some nitty-gritty personal stuff. Y'all ready, Solomon and Phil? Okay, so Phil, I know that you are a manager at Third Party Cyber Risk with the Hershey Company.
Yes.
And Solomon, you are the Chief Information Security Officer at Phillips & Cohen. Okay, so let's just dive right into it because I know I have a lot of good questions for them today. Solomon, I want to start with you first. Tell me, what did your path into tech look like?
I think that's a good question. My story's not unique, but I took a different path. My actual academic background is in aviation, so I was a pilot. There's a similarity there, right? I was a pilot, Delaware State University, working on my aviation program. And it just happened to coincide with the unfortunate incident in this country was September 11th. So coming out of my program, most pilots, after you graduate, you have about 2 years of flight instructing to build up time. Then you go to the commuters. Then you work your way all the way to the commercial airlines. But when people stop to fly, the career becomes dim. And that's when you have to decide if you're going to stay the course. I was already working 4 or 5 jobs just to put myself through college. So staying the course, not seeing a good path forward post 9/11 made me try to pivot into IT. I always had a background in technology. I worked tech support jobs just to put myself through college. So it wasn't a very significant transition for me. But when I committed to it, right? I went back to college. I'd already graduated. I had a degree, re-enrolled in community college, started picking up tech programs, started picking up certifications. And that was how I propelled myself into technology and then into IT. After 20 years into cyber. And I would say my journey is one of those that it tells you you don't have to come in through a traditional tech process, right? One of my best security operations center analysts came from a music background. It's about attention to detail and analytics, and you can build that program wherever you start your journey.
Wow, did y'all hear that? He had gone into aviation, then pivoted, right? And then went back, started at community college, and now he's where he is today. So that tells you what? Again, you don't have to go the path that you think you were. It is okay to pivot, right? Don't feel as though you have to stay in something that you see is going down a downward trend. You can say, you know what? I'm not going to go down that right. I'm going to change. So all right, Solomon, thank you for that. Phil, let's get into you and your journey.
So, like Solomon, my journey into cybersecurity also starts in aviation.
Wow.
I initially, my initial, I guess 18-year-old me wanted to be a U.S. Marine Corps fighter pilot. That didn't happen, but I did get to fly for the Navy as a naval flight officer for a few years, and it was an awesome experience and taught me a lot of skills that I bring to the IT and cybersecurity world. And then through just a couple things happened, and my airframe became a museum piece, and so I had to find something else to do, and I ended up at the Pentagon, still on active duty, working in what is essentially the Navy's IT business office, and they said, "Hey, why don't you come be one of us?" So I said yes, put in the paperwork, and it got approved. So then I shifted from aviation to information technology, more on the business side. Then I had the chance to stand up a cybersecurity response team, which I took, and it was a great experience, and that was kind of my introduction to cybersecurity. And then coming off of active duty, I found an opportunity with the Hershey Company as a governance, risk, and compliance analyst. And from there, it just kind of, everything just kind of happened. I will sometimes jokingly say that I fell into IT by complete and total accident, but the actual reality is that it was a series of very intentional and deliberate decisions one or two may have been made for me, but at the same time, it was intentional and deliberate decision making, not necessarily just, stumbling through life and things happening by accident.
Wow. So again, another story, right, about how their journey led them to where they are. So Phil, I'm going to have to pick on you for a minute. Now, I love my veterans because I am a veteran, but I'm Army. Okay, so you already know. So for
Be an Army, ma'am.
So for those of you that don't know, the Army and Navy have kind of like this rival. So I'm Army, so it's got to be Army. So sorry about that, Phil. But anyway, so moving on, I do want to ask y'all a question. Can y'all tell me, and I'll start with you this time, Phil, about a time that you failed and what you learned from that failure?
That's a great question. And so just to kind of put a little context on it, when I emailed JoAnn about the question, I put failure in quotation marks. And I did that for a reason, because I don't think that anybody or any of us actually really fail per se. So the failure that I'll talk to is probably the first big failure that I had in my professional career, and some of that kind of revolves around why I got out of aviation. Because I had my dream job. I had a version of my dream job, and I wasn't good at it. And so I think there was an element of me that said, "Oh man, I'm failing 6-year-old me. I'm failing 8-year-old me that was sitting in an Air Force fighter jet, thinking this is going to be me in however many years." But looking back on it, I think the reality is, and what I very quickly learned was that it wasn't a failure. It was a roadblock. It was a door opener, because had I been just a little bit better, maybe I wouldn't have been very successful at aviation, but then I also wouldn't have had the opportunity to get in cybersecurity, where I've had a decent. I'd like to think I've had a decent amount of success. And I think when you reach those points in your life, the big thing is to ask yourself the question, now what? Now what do I do? Now what do I look for? Now who do I talk to? Where do I go from here? It's how do I take that next step? And then also to understand, what are the things that I learned about myself that I can take forward with me so that I'm more successful in the next thing, right? Because when you fail per se, it's a learning experience, and I think you have to treat it like that.
Okay, thank you. Solomon?
Yeah, I like how you put it. It's not necessarily failure as it is an opportunity. Mm-hmm. I told you about my journey and my pivot to IT. I didn't tell you anything about that after, because that would have been a long story. But when I pivoted to IT, I did it intentionally, and I said I wanted to be successful here. So like I talked about, I went back to community college, I got the certifications, and I volunteered my time. First, I started helping a colleague's husband's business, setting up basic computers. They recommended me to a church. They recommended me to another hospital. So I started to work on my own to build the experience I needed. I got certified in anything you can imagine, right? So I built a very strong career early on in state government. If it talked about accolades, employee of the month, whatever it is, I got it. And an opportunity came up that gave me the chance to change teams. I looked around the organization. I was the most qualified person for the role. Whether it was through academics, whether it was through experience, whether it was through my background, I thought I checked every box that was right for this position. I went out for the position and somebody else got it. And initially it really hit me. Like, and your first thought process is it cultural? Is it personality? Is it my back? Whatever it is, I went through that whole process. The gentleman that got the job, don't get me wrong, he ended up being very successful. But I left and came back 20 years later, and he was in the same role.
Wow.
But what it made me do was, there's this concept of the bottle of water, if you buy it in the store, if you buy it in the game, the different prices. And I said, maybe I'm worth something elsewhere. So at that point, I never looked on job banks, but I did. and I was hired by QVC, at that time the biggest media entertainment company in the world. And that was a trajectory for my future. I ended up in a role with the responsibilities I wanted, with twice as much money as they would have paid me if I stayed in the state of Delaware.
Amen.
And
Amen.
and it worked out. And I went from there to a chemical company where I had 120 locations globally. Half my team was in Asia. I spent half the year in Asia. I traveled the world. So it was interesting because there are times when I'm at the airport and then I'll see some of my partners they stayed the course, they're still flying, but I was never a chance of envy, right? Because I sat at the business class seat, right? and they drove me around, so I at least appreciated that.
Okay, Solomon, I love that story. And you know what? Sometimes no means new opportunity, right? New opportunity. Solomon took that no and said, you know what? Gonna make my own path, right? So that seems to be our message today, right? So, okay, so we've talked about how you got here. I want to shift a little bit into how the space is evolving. So, how have you seen career paths in cybersecurity or risk evolve over the past few years, and what's really driving that change? Who wants to start with that? Phil said, I'm a pass.
It's interesting because there's a definite theme of AI as we're talking, as we're going through the sessions and the talks this week. But I want to kind of shift, kind of away from AI to give my initial answer to this question, because I think what you're seeing, and I'm talking from a manufacturing perspective, and I think what you're seeing is focus away from the very deep technical skill. Yes, that's still required, but you're seeing a shift away from the very deep technical analyst skill set and more towards people who can take that technical skill that they've built through education and experience and kind of lift their heads up above the grass and see the strategic picture. And you see that with implementation of capabilities like global capability centers across manufacturing and some other industries that aren't necessarily known for deep technical IT skill, even though it's there. So what you're seeing is, we're looking for architects that can talk business, that can talk to the CFO in the CFO's language. We're looking for cybersecurity engineers that can explain to a group of plant workers why they have to go through these 2 extra steps to log into their accounts. We're looking for CISOs that can relate how a specific set of vulnerabilities is going to impact manufacturing across your 4 core North American brands, right? So as you can see, the theme there is business. How does security impact the business? And I think that's one of the places where I don't know if I'll say cybersecurity professionals kind of lack that, but at the same time, cybersecurity has also been kind of an insular pillar within the business where it's, hey, we're behind this wall, you're not going to see us unless something goes wrong. We have to I think we're starting to get away from that. We're starting to get towards infrastructures and constructs where, hey, I'm the chief supply chain officer and I have this project that I want to do. Okay, here's your cybersecurity resource. You need to make sure that that person is there, but that cybersecurity resource needs to be able to talk supply chain, needs to be able to talk data privacy, needs to be able to talk sales and marketing and all that sort of thing. So I think we're seeing a shift where, you're going to need to have a better understanding of business. And one of the things that, I get into this argument with my mentor quite a bit, where, in my opinion, one of the best master's degrees that you can have especially if you're looking to get into cybersecurity management and up to that senior manager, director, or VP level, is a master's of business administration. So.
Wow, that's interesting. Solomon, your take?
Yeah, there is definitely a shift from the technical analytics to outcomes, right? Before my current role, I was a chief security officer for the state of Delaware. That is all branches, executive, legislative, judiciary branch of government. I processed about 5,000 threats against the state a day. Did I say 5,000? Let me correct that. 5 terabytes a day against the state of Delaware. With my tools, with our scripting and our coding and everything, we can get that down to about 2,000 actionable items a day.
Now, Solomon, I have to stop you right there in case we don't know what a terabyte is.
So a terabyte is 5 trillion events per day. And that's everything from somebody going after the law enforcement systems that are, law enforcement cars to our health and social services. The volume of information was so significant. And we used law correlation, other types of capabilities to reduce the volume down to actionable sizes. That actionable size is still 2,000. And I had a team that performed that function of about 6 to 8 with contractors. So what you realize is that we can only go after the most significant incidents. The introduction of AI didn't change what we did. It gave us the ability to reduce from 2,000 down to 100, down to 25 actionable items. So I didn't have to get rid of resources. I just could do more with the less resources that I have as a state government resource. The evolution in technology, in information security, it's about, before we used to, this guy's so good, he can dissect a packet. He's so good, he can just break down the network, right? Now it's not about whether you broke down the network, but whether you can map that down to a business outcome. If that gets compromised, we lose every cop in the country, right? Or all health and social services, EBT cards, everything shuts down. So can you integrate and relate what you do to a business outcome? Is the evolution of IT as we introduce more technology. So the dissecting of the packet became commodity. Something else could do that, right? It's about mapping it to the outcome.
Wow, so not just the technical skills, but being able to communicate as well, and like to Solomon's point and Phil's point, the outcomes. Wonderful. Okay, so another question I have, how should professionals think about specializing, like risk, compliance, versus staying broad?
Well, it's good to come in broad. I always say to come into cyber, if you have the opportunity, spend some time with IT, right? All cyber is a specialization of IT. Right, always use the house analogy. The general contractor used to be able to put in a door, right? It wasn't specialized as a door. Then over time, now we hire specialists for security to put in that really enhanced door. It's still a door, right? So what we do is take the same communication on a wire and say, how do we make it more secure? How do we make sure it doesn't get compromised? So when it comes to cyber, it's really IT, an evolution of IT. So you definitely want to take the chance to learn a bit about networking, a bit about systems, and how they communicate, and then be able to translate that into risk and a mitigation of risk. So when you start off generally with IT, then you look for where's your passion. Some people, they just like looking like numbers all day, right? They like looking at events, they like analyzing events, and they get really excited about that. There are others that are more about business controls. Can I find a risk by the way you're behaving, by the way you're using data, by the way you're interacting with your systems? So you have to identify where you belong. If you belong in the business side, maybe risk is for you. If you belong in analytics, maybe security operations center for you. If you like to build things and take them apart and engineer them, then security engineering is for you. So you look at yourself and what you enjoy doing, and you'll find a path in cyber out there.
Yeah, I think Solomon, I'll agree with everything you said. I think specialization is necessary, just because this whole nebulous thing that we call IT and cybersecurity is just so broad. But I'll also say, once you do figure out kind of where you want to specialize, keep an open mind about cross-training opportunities, right? Because I think, so I'm a risk manager. I'm not deeply technical, but at the same time, I have to understand the technical enough to know when to ask a question or know when to redirect the conversation. And without some of the cross-training opportunities I've had at both Hershey and in the Navy, I wouldn't necessarily have that skill set, right? So, at Hershey, I'm a risk manager. I'm not a security guy in the Navy. I'm not. I am a satellite and RF communications manager in the Navy. I was an electronic warfare officer in the Navy, so I was an offensive guy. But that core experience of offensive electronic warfare and SATCOM and RF management, it's all the same skills. It's a very IT adjacent career field. Like all those same core skills are the same core skills you're going to find in IT. So it's about being able to develop skill sets that you can use in whatever your area of specialty is. And the other thing I'll add to it is don't be afraid to change specialties. One of our identity and access management managers started out as a network engineer and then was then a cyber defense analyst before he became an identity and access management manager. And it's the same, it's roughly the same thing with our current deputy CISO. So don't be afraid to branch out. Find your specialty, find your niche, but don't be afraid to branch out, because you never know what kind of opportunity you might get if you just say, yeah, you know what, I'll take on that little bit of extra.
Awesome. So what are some of the biggest mistakes you see people make when trying to break into tech or cyber or even risk? What are some of the biggest mistakes? We want to learn from you so we don't make those mistakes, right? Amen.
This is going to be a little bit of a hot take, but boot camps.
Ooh.
No, and so boot camps are valuable. They have their value. But here's the thing. Boot camps are aimed at the certification. All a certification does is tell me that you have been able to regurgitate a body of knowledge, right? All it means is that if you have your Net Plus, Sec Plus, that tells me you can regurgitate that means you can regurgitate how to configure a network and then run an Nmap or a Wireshark scan on that network. That's not great, but what I want to actually see you do that. I want you to have the hands-on experience of building that network and then scanning that network and then working with your vulnerability analyst or how do you report that up. So certifications are important. Boot camps are a great way to get and reinforce that knowledge. But I don't think you can rely solely on boot camps, certifications, and degrees to break in. And then kind of complementary to that is don't be afraid to take that entry-level tier 3 help desk job, because that's going to give you a lot of the foundation that you're going to need in order to understand that when a user says, I'm seeing X, Y, and Z, what does that mean for the business? What does that mean for our security posture? And then the other unrelated thing that I'll say is don't think of cybersecurity as its own thing. It is a business process. It is a business enabler. And I think there's an idea of, I don't have to understand how supply chain works to be a good cybersecurity guy. I think you absolutely have to understand how your business's supply chain and financial processes and HR processes and every other business process out there works at your organization, or at least in general, to be a good cybersecurity practitioner.
I definitely agree. And I think what I see a lot is the need for instant gratification. Cybersecurity people making 6 figures and, as far as he can go. And the expectation is that I can get into cyber today and make that kind of money. And a lot of times you lose a lot of great opportunity waiting for that one chance. Like you said, it's okay to take a help desk job. It's okay to get your foot in the door. It's okay to take that entry-level job. It doesn't mean you failed, right? Because a lot of times I had a colleague, my frat brother, he was in social work, He's years in social work, manager, supervisor, but he saw his career wasn't going very far, and he wanted to pivot into IT, but it was just hard for him to imagine going to start from the beginning. So a true encouragement, and I got him in a role and things like that, but now he's leaped ahead to where he wanted to be, at least close to where he wanted to be financially. So the instant gratification, you have to kind of curb that. The other thing, too, is about we're in a unique place in technology, in business, in careers, that the person who knows how to do the job gets the job. There's never been a time like this, at least in my lifetime or recent lifetime, that the most qualified person will get hired. Right? It's not like you're working in a mill, you can bring your cousin over, you can train them, and then they will start working in a mill, right? If you know AI, you know AI. If you don't know AI, you don't know AI, right? So this is like the best time for you to be able to say, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna specialize in it and I'm gonna be the best person at it. Because when you go into the interview, they're not looking at your skin color or where you're coming from. They're like, I have this deliverable, can you deliver it? Right? I have this business problem, can you solve it? So if you think about IT and cyber in that aspect, I'm hiring people who can do the job. That means the field is wide open, right? This is the chance to go learn and come in. What has changed is the concept of I can just go to college and somebody will offer me a job because I have a bachelor's. They don't, we used to hire like 30 people, general people, train them up eventually into roles that might take 2-3 years. Companies don't have that latitude anymore. They want to put you in a role and you deliver value. So this is the chance. Pick a topic, YouTube, wherever you get your information, specialize. And when you walk into that room, you tell them, I can accomplish this goal for you. I'm the best person to accomplish this goal for you. I didn't go to Harvard, but do you want Harvard or do you want somebody who could do this job?
All right. Well, that concludes our session. I want to give a big round of applause to Solomon and Phil so much. Yeah, she put the sign up. She was like, I was like, oh. So again, thank you so much. And I think some takeaways that we learned, what? Be adaptable, stay curious, right? And no means what? New opportunity. So again, thank you so much.
A pleasure. Thank you all. Did you want to take questions?
Anybody have questions for Solomon and Phil? Okay.
Hello, my name is Dr. Shakir Marshall, and I want to first thank you guys for being here and applaud all the insight that you shared. I think it was very valuable and also very relevant. One of the things that you really highlighted was the fact that AI is not really replacing roles, it's really shifting the value. I gave a presentation on that earlier today. Thank you. But what I would like to know is, based on your insight and your expertise, right, since we can assume that AI will not really eliminate roles, it's shifting values, how do you think that is going to shift the nature of the market kind of moving forward? And like really in the short term, so like for the next 6 to 18 months, right? How do you think that the way that the value is shifting is actually shifting what you guys are looking for?
I'll start with short term. It might seem like it's eliminating jobs, but companies are gonna learn, right? There are 3 phases companies go through. First, there's that senior vice president that could go to the boss and say, I can eliminate $1 million of our spend, right? Because I could do it with AI. And then the second phase, they'll realize that AI will start messing up, right? There's a human element of it. You can have an application that opens the door when it hears a knock, right? But tomorrow it hears a thunderstorm and it opens the door. And you want to figure out of the 1,000 code where part controls the sound that makes it open the door. Now you need somebody who can decode that, who understands that application. So companies like Amazon had their biggest and longest outage ever. Because AI wrote the code. Now they needed the developers who were having Diwali to come in and fix it, right? So they're going to go to that phase, and then they're going to start hiring back again. They'll hire at a less price. It's not going to be $500,000 in California, but they are going to realize that there are certain elements of the outcome that needs the human element, and they're going to bring those people back.
That's a great question. I think I'm going to approach it from a slightly different perspective and say I think it's going to force hiring managers and their HR teams and liaisons to be more deliberate and intentional about how they define roles, right? I think it's going to force us to really take a look and say, okay, what does this role, what do I need this role to do? And how do I put this on paper? Because I think as we start to see AI more involved in hiring processes and more involved in the business process, in the business processes, what we're going to have to do is really start to understand transferable skill sets. And the real quick example I'll give is, all right, show of hands, who's familiar with CMMC? All right, so if you're hiring for somebody to come build your CMMC program, and I apply for your position and I tell you that I've spent the last 15 years of my career building GRC programs and compliance programs and security programs based around maturity models designed off of the NIST 800 series cybersecurity documents, do you think I'm qualified to start a CMMC program? Raise your hands if yes. Yeah, because the bottom line is CMMC is based off the NIST 800 series security documents, right? That's what I've been doing for the past, if that's my application, that's what I've been doing for the past 15 years. If I don't put CMMC on my resume because I don't have that specific experience, and you as a hiring manager don't understand the connection between CMMC and the NIST 800 series documentation, then you're gonna round file my application when you've probably just missed out on a very qualified candidate that could have been able to deliver you an exceptional program. So that's kind of why, it goes beyond just cybersecurity. But I think we're going to have to very, very quickly become a lot more deliberate in how we define, advertise, and filter candidates for our roles. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest things you're going to see over the next 6 to 8 months. At least I hope it is.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for coming out and giving this advice. I do have a question. I did come from a boot camp where it's a nonprofit that provides tech education to underrepresented minorities. Now, a lot of the students there, including myself, come from backgrounds such as hospitality or even a janitor and things like that. Now, I understand what you said, and I completely agree that these programs are often focused on getting that first certification. But if you were starting from my position, right, and you came out of these programs and saw that there was not quite a runway, how would you go about building it yourself when you're not coming from a career such as being a pilot or having a significant basis to start from?
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying, how do you build that, building that runway to get the experience even with in conjunction with going to the boot camp?
Yes, not in conjunction, however way you would approach it, but to get to that first position in IT and or cyber.
Yeah, so I do think, so first off, I do think there's value to boot camps, right? I just think you can't use that as your sole entry point into cyber. I think you have to take that, in certain cases, you have to take that entry-level job. And it's not saying that you're not capable of greater things, because none of us would be sitting in this room if we weren't capable of great things. But I think there's the understanding that sometimes you have to start from the bare bones beginning, especially if you're coming from a non-cyber or non-IT adjacent career field. Now, I'm not gonna dismiss your resume if all you have is boot camps, especially if you have other professional experience behind it, right? Because I'm one of those people that has a lot of non-cyber professional experience coming into cyber, and there's the understanding that and it goes back to my earlier comment, there are a lot of transferable skills. And to use a non-cyber example, one of my local breweries, right? The head of their yeast bank used to be a biotech, and I can't remember exactly what his specialty is, but it's something very similar to what my wife does. But again, he didn't know the first thing about brewing beer when he applied for the job, but what he knew about was biolab safety procedures and how to create those environments. That's the type of stuff that I'm going to look for as a hiring manager in cybersecurity, especially if I'm hiring for an entry-level position. Right? Your certifications are great. Your previous experience is great, but what transferable skills do you have? If you've been a call center analyst for anything and you're applying for a help desk job in IT, hey, that's great previous transferable experience. If you were a data privacy analyst that's applying for a GRC analyst role, that's great experience, because I'll say it, and I hope everybody agrees with me, data privacy and cybersecurity are two sides to the same coin. So it's all about how do you market your transferable skills in a manner that tells the hiring manager, hey, I may not have a deep background in cybersecurity, but I've got all this other stuff that you need in order for this program to deliver value to the organization.
I would say the fastest way is a home lab, right? Whatever you've learned from your certifications, build a home lab. You can go on eBay, you'll find a switch, you find a computer, build your home lab, and then post your progress on LinkedIn. I've hired people just by their progress on LinkedIn, because what it shows is, one, a passion for what you're doing, that you just do it because you just want to make a little bit more money, and two, that you continue to grow, right? You continue to interact with the technology, continue to evolve the technology, and then take a job. It doesn't have to be, if you took your bootcamp in networking, it doesn't have to be a network job. It could be a help desk job. Because when you get your foot in the door, the next network position becomes available. I got the cert, right? You're next up. Build the lab, invest in yourself, volunteer, provide services, because every time you volunteer, it's on your resume, right? You can have a resume full of volunteering work, but it shows a passion and it shows growth. That will get you there.
Maybe we take one more question.
Hello, how you guys doing? My name is Abdul. Question for both of you guys, really. Just more like an opinion, see what your thoughts on it are. But currently, in the workforce in Canada, they are currently doing a thing where they're implementing a lot of human and AI agent collaborations in the workforce. That shot up by 80% compared to the United States of America. My question to you guys as security leaders, what do you think is the cause of that? Is it the companies themselves making those improvements, or leadership on our side that is lacking on it? And what are your thoughts on how we can make improvements onto those things?
It's a couple of things. One is consumer pressure and client pressure, right? If our client wants, hey, I pay you 10% commission on something, I'm trying to reduce it to 5%. So now you have to look for ways to cut your costs, whether you cut in human or you cut in some other places. So there's a lot of pressure from clients, from whether it's just customers that want a better reaction, better interaction. But the challenges that we're still facing is regulatory, right? When we deal with people's information, giving agentic AI access to a database means you giving it access to that database, right? So there's that privacy concern, the data leakage concern that is limiting the growth in this country. And it's actually worse in Europe. I have locations in Europe that we're struggling to evolve that effort. But what we're focusing on, rather than enterprise-based or cloud-based AI, is internal AI solutions. where we can bundle them with our own technology internally, firewalled off, controlled off, so we can do those interactions more for the internal community. So there's more growth coming. The delay is that companies are building it in-house rather than leveraging commercial tools.
Yeah, I think the compliance side of it is definitely a challenge. And you know, for those of you that are in GRC or regulatory compliant or regulatory horizon scanning or anything like, you know, those types of things, kind of understand that the more complex the regulatory and compliance side gets, the more complicated it is to be able to adopt those AI human teams, and a lot of it goes to, you know, in my industry, looking at consumer data, right? That's very sensitive data, highly regulated, lots of things that have to go into how we protect the consumer data, GDPR, CCPA, you name it. But I think the other big challenge is that a lot of organizations don't necessarily understand how AI is going to fit into their overall technology and security strategy. And I think at that point, AI becomes what I like to call a double-edged sword, right? So you have the agentic human teams where AI is a capability multiplier, an enhancement to your organization, but then at the same time, and you know, we're going to ignore the impacts that AI is having on hacking, and just kind of look at some of the insecurities and risks involved with using AI and building an agent, where, you know, you've got things like hallucination, or if you don't have it walled off correctly, and something happens to that underlying model, what legal recourse do you have for recoupment if there is some type of data breach? Does the AI company even have the obligation to tell you that they've been breached and that your data may be compromised? But then I also think there's a little bit of a human element to some of the adoption challenges and limitations. It's humans. I think there's humans inherent. If anybody's familiar with Isaac Asimov's I, Robot series and the Robot and Foundation books, humans inherently don't trust machines. It just is, because they're not natural. We don't see them as human, and they're not, and they don't have morals, and they don't have a thought process. It's artificial intelligence, not synthetic intelligence. And so I think, number one, we have to figure out the regulatory and risk components of it too. But I think we also, and this is where some of the UX folks in the room can come in, we have to figure out how we're going to work that HMI, that human-machine interface, to get us to a point where we are more comfortable in being able to talk to an AI agent. And the compliance piece is going to have a huge part of that, is because I'm not going to give you my social security number or my phone number unless I trust that you are going to keep that confidential and you are not going to misuse that. I don't trust the AI. How many movies are there out there about AIs gone rogue, right? Humans inherently do not trust machines.
Thank you.
Thank you.